talking to my friend Dr. Ted Baehr on a beautiful California day with the sun shining in his window at his home here on the hilltop and his foot full of pain and Vicodin, is that what it is? Dr. Ted, thank you for letting us into your house and into your hospitality. We're going to ask you some questions about meaning.
Making a film is very treacherous. Script is like the architectural plans for your building. A building, it doesn't matter too much because it can wander around, but a bridge, if the architecture fails, the bridge fails. And a movie is very much more precise than a novel, which can wander around. It's got to be extremely precise to support the weight of the traffic between the filmmaker's heart and your heart and the audience's heart. And most people think because they watch movies, they can make movies. That's like saying, oh, I looked at the Golden Gate Bridge. I've seen it all my life. I can make a bridge.
What makes for a meaningful movie?
What makes a movie attractive to people is, one, that you've got a great story. And the best source of stories and how to structure a story in the last century was Lagos Agri. And Lagos Agri takes all of his stuff from Aristotle. So Aristotle said plot first, character second, dialogue third, idea fourth, music fifth, spectacle last. And everybody sort of snickers because they think spectacle in Greece, but in Greece you had spectacle. They had burning cauldrons and they lowered down Deus Ex Machina on these pulleys and things. So they had spectacle, but you can put a lot of spectacle in and bore the audience. And Spielberg took, War of the Worlds, which was a good movie, and turned it into Bore of the Worlds. So spectacle doesn't make it. You can take a good music artist like Bob Dylan and turn him into a boring movie, which makes like $50,000 at the box office. There's one movie after another that makes less than $7 million because it's a documentary just full of ideas. So what makes a movie is plot, and plot can be constructed. So that's number one, a great story. Number two is good triumphs over evil. Now, when I teach at Berkeley or even Christian schools like Regent or Baylor or whatever, kids always say, I don't want good to triumph over evil. I said, well, that's because you're in college. When you're 64 and your foot hurts, you want to be healed. You really want, and when you know how difficult that is, you want intervention. So that's the third point. You want a savior, like Superman taking Lois above Metropolis and saying, you said the world didn't need a savior, but I hear all these people crying out for a savior, and he lets her hear the mother with the child who's dying. So those three elements are what give meaning to a film. I've said that in a very careful way. My students love, it was Bergman's last film, about 5 people who hated each other and wanted to kill each other and commit suicide. No plot, no story, no action, nothing happens. And it made $56,000 at the box office. So for them, they're not going to find much meaning in Finding Nemo. But for most people, Finding Nemo has got those major elements. Good triumphs over evil, he finds his son. There's divine intervention when the whale shows up. All of that happens in an extraordinary way to tell a story that just touches your heart. Movies are carried on a very simple premise. And the premise is what drives the meaning home of the movie. And as Alfred Hitchcock said, the lawyers usually make the best writers because they're selling the case to the jury. Rich did not, beat his wife or whatever you want to be. So that's the message. In the beginning of it, most great films tell you what the premise is. Every commercial does that. Geico, it gives you insurance at a better rate, and it tells you what it's going to say, it says it and tells it. So in Finding Nemo, which is a great example of a great script, right at the beginning when Nemo is captured, he says, I'm going to cross the ocean, I'm going to do everything I can to capture my son. You know where he's going. Why do you have to know where he's going? Because Catherine would not get up if Andrew Stanton, a 55-year-old portly guy, came up to her and said, come with me. But when she says, my son's missing, when Andrew says, we've got to cross the universe to find my son, suddenly you're tugging at her social heartstrings. So she's ready to go on the journey. In the middle of the movie, he's got to go through all the things he says. He's going to fight with sharks. He's going to go across the Great Barrier Reef. He's going to ride the Great Australian Current. You tell the same story. You give them the premise. The premise is always an active statement. And I work with studio people all the time. Very few of them understand how to frame a premise. It's very hard for people to do that because they've got all sorts of preconceived notions. So suddenly you give the premise again, and Nemo says, "Dad, you're coming to rescue me." And of course the next thing is he's flushed down the drain. But your heart is pulled because suddenly you're reminded of this great quest that's going on. And at the end of the movie, just after Nemo's almost been totally lost, he's just panting and he's barely alive, and he says, "Dad, you swam across the ocean, you fought with sharks, you went through razor sharp, you did all this stuff just to find me." So that's the premise. You've driven the premise home.
So tell one powerful story about you.
About whatever it is. You're not doing a novel. You know, the greatest novel, and my son Jim, who's a lawyer, and he's a JAG lawyer, and he's winning his cases, and he's very good. He's not supposed to be winning his cases because he's a defense lawyer, and they usually don't win in the JAG. And, you know, his favorite book is Bonfire of the Vanities, and it was a lousy movie. So he wants to write a novel, and I'm saying, Jim, no. You know, if you want it to turn into a movie, you can't do Bonfire of the Vanities. What's the central storyline of Bonfire of the Vanities? What's the central storyline of Name of the Rose? What's the central storyline of The Garden of Good and Evil? You know, what's the central storyline of, you know, it's got to be something. That's why Alfred Hitchcock said the worst books make the best movies. Because the dime store novels is what he was talking about, the worst books, because they got straight ahead, clear, Zane Grey, you know, Gresham type plots that are just simple. What is the trial about? It's about a trial. There's not much sophistication there. And the sophistication is now the way you frame the characters and tell the story. The story is simple. You know ahead of time in most movies where it's going to go. But you've got to be able to tell the story in the richness that everybody's just, you know, as soon as they see a clownfish, they fall in love with them.